There is no way to work it out with a narcissist. There is no way, if you hang out long enough, talk it out long enough, get couples therapy, family therapy, workplace therapy, friend therapy, that it will work out. The narcissist will not change, and your body and mind will not adjust to their impact on you.
I'm guessing that probably over half of people stay in relationships with narcissists. Let's start with the intimate relationship, the close relationship, because that's usually where people are feeling like, do I stay with this person or do I leave? Okay? So why do people stay? For reasons that are extraordinarily valid. Because they have children together, because of financial reasons, religious and cultural reasons, convenience, fear of being alone, um, fear that other financial obligations, for example, that they got one house and they're not going to be able to afford another place to live, a sense of extended family and they feel an obligation to them. And finally, I think some people stay because people don't quite understand what narcissism is. The other reasons I listed, a lot of them are very, very practical. Though I have to say a fair number of people stay. I have to tell you a lot, in fact, more than a fair number, a significant number of people stay because they say, I still love this person, or the sex is great. And you know what? Those are valid reasons too. It's never my place to doubt that someone loves someone. Another big reason that people stay is because they don't understand the territory that they're in. They really do believe that if they try hard enough, that if they do more, that if they're more attractive, that if the house is cleaner, that if they're more attentive, that if they do more of the things that the narcissist wants, that they can win them over or they can win them back. And so I think that there's sort of two issues. The practical issues, I can't question that for someone. Somebody says, I really, frankly, do not have the money, the ability to go out on my own. I have no place questioning that. And we'll talk in a moment about the reality of staying in a relationship with a narcissist. But for people who don't understand this territory, I'll be totally frank with you. The amount of change you'll observe in a narcissistic partner is never going to be enough to keep that relationship going. I've taken a fair amount of criticism. People saying, that's not fair. How can you get out there and say narcissists don't really change? Because narcissists don't really change. If they don't think there's anything wrong with what they're doing, they're definitely not going to change. Even when a person has a wake-up call and says, yeah, wow, I'm not a very nice person. It seems to be that everyone leaves me and I've really hurt a lot of people. Even if you get a person to that level of insight, they say they want to change. What we do see is that under stress, even if they're doing the hard work, they'll go right back to their usual ways of arrogance and rage and dismissiveness. It's just sort of where they go. It's like a rubber band. They can get it out to here, but when the stress comes, they go back to their usual. In an intimate relationship, that's where you feel that the most. It could be if somebody's just a friend or an acquaintance, you might say, oh, he's back to being a jerk, and it won't bother you as much. But for somebody in a close relationship, you really do get to see the very worst of a person up close. So if a person's going to stay, I say, are you willing to stay if you know things are never going to get better and things are never going to change? If you're okay with that and you stay, then you're staying with realistic expectations. But if you're staying because you think this year on our anniversary it's going to be different, on my birthday it's going to be different, on my wedding day it's going to be different, when my first child is born it's going to be different, you are waiting for a bus that's never going to come. So the reasons people stay are myriad. Practical reasons, that's something you sort out for yourself. And if you have to stay under those conditions, it's really important you manage realistic expectations. That you say, I'm staying for money, but realize my emotional needs are probably not going to be met in this relationship. If you're staying because you think, honestly, this relationship is going to change enough because you can fix it, because you can rescue this person, that's not a realistic expectation. Let's step out of that for a second and talk about other relationships in your life. For example, having a narcissistic parent. And again, one thing we'd love to hear from all of you who are subscribing here, if you want to even send some comments and questions to us about why you stayed, that would be great for all of us to learn from that. But when it comes to a parent, a lot of people say, I don't know that I want to break up with my mom or dad. And you don't have to. But the one thing you also don't need to do is be a punching bag for anybody. You can maintain a relationship, but you can maintain it with realistic expectations. Know that when the conflict starts to come up, or they're kind of poking at you, looking for the fight, don't give them the fight. You're never going to win at it. They're always dirtier fighters than you anyhow. And that can apply to parents or siblings, where if you can set better boundaries and more reasonable expectations, you can actually survive Thanksgiving dinner without getting down in the mud or storming out before dessert is served. It's really about learning how to stick to the superficial and stop going to an empty well. Stop going to people who do not have the empathy to give you in the first place. When you stay in these relationships, whether it be a parent or a sibling or a friend, be prepared for that, and then make your decisions accordingly. Listen, I have worked with people, and I know people who said, to heck with this. My mother's a raging narcissist. I'm going no contact with her. I'm not having a relationship with her anymore. People have done that. Other people have said, I only have one set of parents. I want to maintain a relationship with them. But once they made their expectations more realistic, they were able to make it work. So this can apply not just to your intimate relationships, but to family relationships, even at work, quite frankly. Let's say you do have that sort of toxic, narcissistic coworker, and you need to keep the job. Don't engage. Don't engage with them. That advice, don't engage, probably applies to all narcissistic relationships. You can stick to the facts. The weather, the new store that opened down the street, who won the Oscar. Those are simple, and even that might be too controversial. But that's a way to keep it simple. But the fact of the matter is whether we stay in these relationships or not, the important part of staying is we all have our reasons, but the key is to stay with realistic expectations so you don't keep getting your heart broken. So again, if those of you who decide to stay, I would love to hear from you on the reasons you stay. I've got to tell you, in my years of doing this work, I've heard of hundreds of reasons for why people stay. It was very difficult until they understood the territory and what to expect. And once they got that wired, they said, you know what? Holidays don't bother me anymore. In fact, in one case, I had helped somebody say they wanted their mother at a particular family event, and they actually took a family member and assigned them to her because they knew their mom's tendency would be to make a mess of everything because it had to be all about her. And by doing that and really making it clear to that other person, your job is really to keep her from ruining this event and stealing the person's thunder whose party it was, it worked for that particular family. So come up with a plan that works for you. It's not always easy to stay in these relationships. It's a very personal choice. But as long as you can stay in a way that feels as authentic to you as possible, that's one way to sort of stay sane and stay in relationships that may not always be healthy for you. Again,
I have a very, I don't know what to call it, like a guilty hobby maybe of reading like tabloidy pop culture magazines. I do it for a couple of reasons, partly because it's a guilty pleasure, but I never know anyone I'm reading about. But my main reason for doing it is I'm trying to get a vibe on what sort of the public conversation is about relationships and love and dating, especially in an era of online dating and stuff like that. As an older person, I'm not always up on it. So I was then reading an article about someone I actually didn't know who they were. My team explained who it was. I'm not even going to mention this person's name because this video isn't about, because again, I'm about civility. This video isn't about like bringing an individual down. I mean, it's more of a, that's not what I'm interested in. What I troubled me was I came to find out that the person who made this statement has a very big platform. And because of that, when somebody says something like this, and I know the impact it's going to have on survivors, I get very concerned. So let me read you what this person wrote, okay? I should say person said. I read it and I was like, what the? And then I read it again. I was like, what the actual? And then the third time I read it, I sent it to my team and I said, I think I'm offended by this. Okay, so this is what this person said. Quote, if you're with somebody, and let me go back, but this person is talking about a romantic relationship or a marriage. Okay, so quote, if you're with somebody that doesn't make you feel heard or safe or put you on a pedestal or just honored in a way, it's not worth it. If you can't be authentically yourself while you're madly in love with somebody, you're not in the right relationship. So you're all like, whoa, Dr. Ramani, what's wrong with that? Nothing. Here's the punchline. She then went on to say, so if you can't be, all the stuff she said, you can't authentically be yourself while you're madly in love and you're not in the right relationship. If you stay in this relationship, she's saying, it's not serving you at all or the other person, and it's selfish. And I was like, what? It's selfish? So basically, every single person out there who is in a narcissistically abusive relationship where they're being invalidated and manipulated and devalued and minimized and gaslighted and baited and yelled at, they sure as hell aren't being put on any kind of damn pedestal. They definitely don't feel safe. They're not being honored, and they can't be authentically themselves. If a person stays in that kind of relationship, according to this person, you are selfish. I was so offended. I went back and I read it 3 times. I screenshotted it, sent it to other people. Am I wrong? And you're thinking, well, no, you're not. You better be thinking, no, you're not, folks, because this is the problem. That by dint of a person staying in a relationship where they're being treated badly, the person who stays in the relationship is selfish. Because that's not nice to the other person who's not putting you on a pedestal. That's basically, and Dr. Ramani speaks, saying you're being selfish because you're staying in a relationship with somebody who's emotionally abusing you. I have a problem with that. Because that languaging is in essence what you're doing is you're harming your abuser because you're staying in the relationship with them. Now, this person obviously is no relationship guru, and after reading this person's relationship history and all that, don't know that they should be. But the fact that bothered me, above all else, this person's life is irrelevant to us, is that they have a platform. And on that big platform, not as a mental health expert, not as a person who is training in relationships, but just as a person, but that everyone will listen to. There's folks out there listening who might be a fan of this person who will think, well, I'm not on a pedestal and I'm not being myself authentically and I'm staying with this person because I'm scared to get out of this. But now this person I value is telling me that I'm selfish. This right here is why so many survivors struggle. Sure, you may come to this channel, of channels like this, content out there, and say, okay, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm right, this relationship isn't right, this isn't healthy. You're getting some validation. But there's a bigger landscape out there of people who this person, I read the rest of the article, turns out this person's very happy in their particular marriage and things have worked out for them. Good for you. Okay, great for you. You find yourself a happy relationship. I'm actually very happy for people. But this is like going to somebody who's saying, my expertise in having a relationship is merely that I'm happy, is like me consulting with a lottery winner on how to pick 6 numbers. It doesn't make sense. You got lucky, right? At some level, she got lucky. This ain't about work. It's in many ways about luck. And then people like to say, yeah, because we work so hard. No, it's because somebody isn't invalidating and gaslighting you on the daily. Good for you. But when people have these platforms and they shame folks who are stuck in situations that they don't know how they can get out of, that trauma bonding is making it even harder psychologically to pull themselves out and to be labeled and branded as selfish, that is not okay. For you, as a survivor of the narcissistically abusive relationships and the fallout that follows, you not only have to be discerning regarding the kinds of people you maintain relationships with, the way you set boundaries, the way you go through the world, you also have to be discerning about what you read. Because for a moment I tried to think, okay, you're not Dr. Ramani who studies narcissism, you're a person who's been through this. Try to be in that space and you're reading something like this. And I'll tell you this, I kind of felt sick. I felt sick like, well, there's something wrong with me because, wait a minute, when I stayed in that relationship for a really long time when I was being mistreated, I was being selfish because I was staying in a relationship that was unhealthy. What? And then I really took it to a place where there are people out there who don't have the supports I have and had, who may not have access to the resources I have, and they're reading something like that, and it's really eating themselves up. So now not only are they in a relationship where they're not being put on a pedestal, where they don't know how to get out, not only are they stuck in something terrible, now they get to sit with that, plus the self-blame they face as survivors. And why don't we throw on top of that some random, for some reason, celebrity, for reason I'm not clear on why this person is, but some celebrity person is saying you're selfish. This is why, unfortunately, in the era of social media and internet, when anyone can say some kind of foolish thing and it can travel around the world like that, and platforms are given to people who say these things, that survivors now face the double duty of reading things that are put out there, people that they might even be fans of, and having to learn to read this stuff with a more discerning eye or a more critical eye, or better yet, don't read it at all. That's an example of a celebrity making an insensitive comment, but it also helps us reflect on the idea of how many people have to listen to this kind of nonsense from the people in their day-to-day lives, the real enablers, or the people who just don't want to see it, the people who say, well, if your marriage isn't happy, well, maybe you're being selfish staying in this, or you're being selfish not appreciating this, or how come you're not on a pedestal? And you know, I've said on this channel, someone putting you on a pedestal is already a dangerous precedent anyhow. But forget the celebrity talking nonsense. In your own life, you might get feedback that is shaming and invalidating. And it makes the process of making decisions about these relationships, setting boundaries, to stop blaming yourself, to sort of stop listening to that invalidating narrative. It makes it all the more difficult, because just when you get your head over the wall, you see the light and you say, I am not going to feel shame about being in a toxic relationship. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even understand this. And yet somebody can so, in such a dismissive way, say, well, you must be selfish for staying in a relationship where everything isn't just picture perfect. It's insensitive. It doesn't account for the real experience of toxic relationships that so many people are enduring. So I guess the best takeaway we can get is definitely don't take your relationship advice from somebody who has no place giving it. Sure, you can share your story, and if the person had stopped there and kept, wanted to go on and on and on about how wonderful their marriage is, how wonderful their children are, how wonderful their life is, great, good for them. Heaven bless you. Go forth and consider yourself a fortunate one. But then to twist their good fortune, to frame it as though somebody's selfish for staying in something that isn't good, I got a real problem for that. I got a real problem with that, I should say. And this is probably why you shouldn't be turning, none of us should ever turn to a celebrity for relationship advice. Them's my thoughts. Would love to hear yours. Share 'em. How would you feel about being called selfish for being in a relationship where you're not being treated well? It's a really, really twisted mindset, but I'd like to hear if you have something different to say about it. So here's the question. What does a victory in a narcissistic relationship look like? Obviously, some people may think it looks like the narcissist getting punished or getting called out and us being fabulous and walking into a fabulous sunset. No, that version may not happen for most of us. But really, what does narcissistic victory as part of recovery look like? How do we celebrate these victories? How do you know you are actually healing from narcissistic abuse? And what do you do about those setbacks? This series, this Narcissistic Victory series, will take on all of that and more. But the initial question was powerful. What does a victory even look like? Please drop a comment right now. What has victory looked like for you in a narcissistic relationship, if you've experienced any of those victories? Maybe let's now take this to a more fine point. What does victory look like if you are still in a narcissistic relationship? I'd like to thank one of our viewers named Tim for this one. You know who you are. He sent an email, and that email led me thinking for a few weeks about several issues here, and it dovetailed at the same time with several conversations I've had with survivors in the past few months. I loved his thought, like, what does a narcissistic victory look like? In the first episode of the series, we're going to talk about what victory looks like in a narcissistic relationship that you are still in, because I know that's a lot of you out there. The fact is that the victories can look a little different depending on whether you're in the relationship, out of the relationship, and even the type of relationship that it is. But if you are in one of these relationships, you're still in, very in your narcissistic relationship, what does victory look like? So, number one, victory looks like this. You catch yourself before you share good news. Now, this is a concept I've actually talked about for years. I've said it consistently in narcissistic relationships. You can't share good news with the narcissist when you're in one of these relationships, or for that matter, bad news either. But sharing good news with an important narcissist in your life, for example, a partner, is such a common error. I'm going to tell them this good thing that happened, and they're going to be so happy for me, and we're going to have a good evening. And many times, people make the further mistake, not even just of sharing their good news, but they make the mistake of telling the narcissistic person their good news first. And then by doing that, they have to deal with the narcissistic person's invalidation or minimization or mockery, and the good news loses all of its joy. So in this case, what does victory look like? This is what victory looks like. You get good news, and you share it with other people first. The fact is that the narcissist is going to get angry if they learn your good news from a third person. But if they do that and come back at you and say, why didn't you tell me? You could say, oh, I didn't think the good news was that big a deal. The fact is, narcissistic people hate not being in the know, but then they want to criticize you for your good news. The victory in this case is that you shared your good news with other people first who are happy for you. Or you can share the good news with other people first, and after you got to experience the good vibes around your good news, then and only then tell the narcissistic person. So even if they do invalidate you, and they probably will, it won't sting nearly as much because you really got to enjoy it. Number two, you set a boundary. For example, not agreeing to go to something or do something that's not good for you. Narcissistic relationships are like a series of bad gags that people keep falling for. Setting a boundary and sticking to it, even in a small way, is a way to feel a sense of strength within your narcissistic relationship. The boundary may be small or big, but to do it, to set that boundary and hold that boundary and not be manipulated out of it, can help you build what's called a sense of efficacy, like that you know you can do it in this relationship. It is uncomfortable as hell to do this, but after the first several times, you may get better at it. The victory then becomes setting the boundary and sticking to it. Start small and work your way up. It's not easy to maintain boundaries with a narcissist, but even if you can find some small ones, you'll feel a lot better. Number three way to get victories is you avoid sharing information with the enablers. The enablers are a big part of the narcissistic picture. They are what keep the narcissist propped up, that keep gaslighting you on top of the narcissist gaslighting you, and they legitimize the narcissist to the world, often making you look more foolish. Many times, people may actually get good at not sharing information with the narcissist, but they keep making the mistake of sharing information with the enablers. And sometimes these enablers are flying monkeys who take that information you give them and share it with the narcissist straight away. Self-protection can mean ensuring that you stop sharing information that, for example, may be an issue for the narcissist with people who will take it and use it against you or share it with the narcissist. The victory in this case is you got to figure out who the enablers are, and that's its own work. But you got to figure out who the enablers are, and then you need to learn to become as restrained with them as you are learning to be with the narcissists. Victory Kind of number 4, if you're still in a relationship, you don't take the bait. This is a big one. It cuts to the core of being able to firewall and gray rock in these relationships. Not taking the bait, not engaging, not giving them what they want, and you getting all frothed up and reacting. That's actually one of the biggest victories that you can have. It's hard initially because they get angry when you don't engage, and they will double down and bait and gaslight more and escalate the baiting. If you can be resolute and not give in, you can get through to the other side. And sometimes it leads the narcissist to find new targets that are more baitable and might kind of get the narcissist off your back. The victory in this case is simply that you don't take the bait and you don't crack even when they keep turning up the volume on the baiting and they really say and really do hurtful things. This is not easy because they will keep upping the baiting, going after things and after people that are sacred to you. Hold your ground. That's a big victory. Number 5, you stop telling things to the narcissist. You stop sharing things with the narcissist and expecting validation. Now, this is a riff on the number 1 sort of point I made here, and it's this idea of not sharing good news, but a little bit different. A mistake that many people make in narcissistic relationships is that they may just tell the narcissist, "Ooh, I got a compliment from my boss today," or "Our friends were telling me what a great cook I am." People often do this to see if they can evoke a rare bit of validation from the narcissist in their lives. Don't do it. It doesn't feel good when you have to try and pry validation out of the narcissist. It may end up in them making fun of you or asking, why is it that you need so much validation? Despite the fact that you are getting none in this relationship, and if this is one of your primary relationships, that can really feel hard. And you are often doing this to try to convince yourself that, see, I told them something good and they validate me. No, they don't. And having to pull the validation out of them doesn't count, and it rarely works. The victory on this one is you don't do it. And you recognize that when it comes to validation, the narcissistic person is in fact an empty well. Number 6 is you maintain your realistic expectations and don't get as disappointed. That's a big victory in these relationships. A central pillar to surviving a narcissistic relationship is realistic expectations. You don't expect validation, you don't expect empathy, you don't expect respect. It sucks, but at least it's honest. Realistic expectations are a hedge against disappointment, and disappointment doesn't feel good, and it is what can really take a psychological toll on you. The victory here, if you have these realistic expectations, you aren't as disappointed or surprised when they let you down. It may still hurt a little. In fact, it will still hurt a little. But it is less shocking, and you almost grow to expect it. And slowly, you rely on them for less and less. Number 7 victory is you actually learn to have a plan B in place. Now, this builds upon the realistic expectations. Here's a classic version of this: the drive to the doctor. There is a classical error people make in narcissistic relationships. You think, I know they're an ass most of the time. I know they have no empathy, but I really do believe that when I am sick, that they will step up because everyone helps sick people. I mean, no one's going to let me down then. No, not everybody does help sick people, and no, they're not going to help you when you're sick. Let's say you have an appointment for a procedure or some other medical appointment or something where you won't be allowed to drive yourself home. At those times, I highly recommend you set up a hard and fast plan B. That may be a friend, a family member, a transport service, or a taxi, or some sort of Uber or something like that. You are welcome to ask the narcissist, hey, I have my procedure tomorrow and I need to be there at 7. And when they yammer on about how they're oh so busy, or what, you never told me you had this appointment. Yes, you did. Then you can calmly say, no worries, my friend from work said she can do it. The victory on this one is that you take away their power by having a plan B. In essence, when a narcissistic person pushes back on what you need, it's a form of baiting. And lots of people say, what? You're not going to take me to the doctor? Well, having a plan B is the ultimate anti-bait. Number 8 way to have a victory is you actually make the deep technique work. You remember deep, my easy technique to avoid getting sucked in too much. Don't defend, don't explain, don't engage, don't personalize. This technique takes in a lot of territory. It helps with baiting, it addresses gaslighting, it helps with self-blame, and it saves time. It's not easy initially because it is natural to want to defend and explain. And this all feels personal. And because you are in a relationship with this person, obviously you want to engage. But any form of engaging is wasting time. The victory here is that by using the deep technique, what do? You take away their power and you feel more sane. Victory number 9, you don't fall for the gaslighting. Let's save the best for last on this one. Remember that gaslighting is a process of grooming, manipulation, and then a way to dominate you by doubting your reality and then painting you out to be the one who is unstable or delusional or confused or mentally ill. There are a few ways to do this. One, going backwards a little here, is using the deep technique, not responding or not reacting in a given moment. Sometimes you may even need to do a fake kind of a capitulation. You're right, you've said it before, I don't know what I'm talking about. And then you disengage. Now, this last bit is a little bit passive aggressive, but when you are being gaslighted, let's face it, it's survival time. And always, always hold on to your reality. The victory, when you're stuck in one of these narcissistic relationships and you can sort of push back on the gaslighting, the victory is that you do not let them leave you questioning yourself anymore, and you end up taking away a lot of their power. Gaslighting, in a way, is a form of baiting because it happens so much over time. It leaves you confused and doubting yourself. So these are some examples of victories that could happen if you end up currently staying in or planning on staying in a narcissistic relationship. Stay tuned because the victories when you are out of the relationship will be coming up in one of our next videos in this series. The accumulation of these small victories over time mean that at least you are creating a safe space in yourself in a space that is not safe. A narcissistic relationship will never be good for you, nor will it ever feel good. But you can have these small victories that may at least make it bearable, so you can foster and cultivate other areas of your life. So if you have any other thoughts about what might represent a narcissistic victory if you stay in one of these relationships, please do drop it in the comments. Can a person heal in a narcissistically abusive relationship or from a narcissistically abusive relationship just as well if you stay as if you go? That's the question. Drop that in the comments. Yes or no. Can you heal just as well if you stay as if you left the relationship? Putting those comments in there. Okay. So, ready for the answer? No. And then we can be done with the video, right? No. Unfortunately, it is that simple. I wish it wasn't, but it is. I absolutely believe that people who stay in these relationships can still heal, but as far and as much, no, no. I don't want this to be a depressing video. And who am I kidding? All of my videos are depressing-ish, but I don't want this to be that. But I also want those who stay in these relationships to stop blaming themselves for not getting past it in the same way as those whose narcissistic relationships end. Listen on in this video to hear why that is the case. The great conundrum of narcissistic abuse is the big question of whether people can stay or leave from these relationships. Get the divorce or stick it out until the children are older. Quit the job or stick it out because of the benefits. Cut out from the family or stick it out because your parents are getting older and you want to protect a good and kind family member from more conflict. Leave the friend group, which is your support system, or tolerate that toxic friend so you can feel like you're a part of a group of people that matter to you. These aren't easy questions. So now let's keep in mind there's leaving and then there's leaving. Just like narcissism, leaving is on a continuum. We know that narcissists can range from low grade, superficial, emotionally stunted, really annoying people. And it can go all the way up to malignant, dangerous, narcissistic people. Leaving is also on a continuum. A continuum is from just kind of disconnecting and disengaging, but sort of still seeing the narcissistic person regularly. But maybe you move out of the house, or maybe you move further away, or maybe you don't even do those things, but you just don't really interact with them in any meaningful way. And that goes all the way up to no contact. They can't find you. You don't ever respond again, that kind of thing. So now all levels of leaving are not available to everybody, though. Narcissism and narcissistic abuse are based on something we can call sort of a dose response model. What does that mean? It means that the more you are exposed to the narcissistic person, in essence, the higher the dose of the narcissistic person you get, the more of a toll it takes on you. So if you have to live with a narcissistic person 24/7 and spend time with them and talk with them, that will most likely make you far more sick and unhealthy than if you still have to see someone every month with little contact in between. In both cases, there's contact, but obviously one is far less contact than the other. The more contact you have with a narcissistic person, the more problems you will have. It's pretty linear. Now, the challenge with narcissism and narcissistic relationships is that you waste a lot of time and bandwidth on workarounds, making sure that you don't engage, avoiding difficult conversation topics, managing the negative feelings of being invalidated, the stress of being gaslighted, energy spent avoiding their rage, walking on eggshells, dealing with their victim bully victim shifts, dealing with the hypocrisy of the relationship, being embarrassed by their entitlement. They are often just quite horrible people, but that can also mess with your head because you may feel guilty when you hear their victimized narratives. And being around them, even if you are the wizard of gray rocking, firewalling, deep techniquing, and all the rest of it, is exhausting and depleting and triggering and chips away at your authenticity and can really result in you living half a life. So as long as you are in it, then you will never fully heal. If you break a leg and you keep walking on the broken leg, the bone is never going to set. If you have an illness and don't get the proper treatment for severe illness, the disease may spread or never quite resolve and do a lot of damage. It's the same with this. If you can't get out of it, it will do you in. This ain't the common cold that just works itself out. This will not work itself out if you stay in the relationship. Because here is the bottom line. There is no way to work it out with a narcissist. There is no way if you hang out long enough, talk it out long enough, get couples therapy, family therapy, workplace therapy, friend therapy, that it will work out. The narcissist will not change, and your body and mind will not adjust to their impact on you. You will keep feeling terrible. There is not some moment after 20 years, 30 years, 40 years that it just gets better. It is just always unhealthy. We don't adjust to things that are unhealthy. Our bodies and our minds and our souls just slowly and silently get harmed. And for this reason, lots of people will observe the narcissistic person outliving others in a family or a relationship, or that they will just, that you as a person in a narcissistic relationship will just get sick more, or have health problems that genetics don't explain. All of this are the long-term impacts of being in a toxic relationship. It doesn't get better. There is no working it out. Ultimately, the only fix is that somehow you get significant distance or out of the relationship. Now, as I thought about this video, I did a personal reflection. I have been impacted by narcissistic abuse in family relationships, intimate relationships, friendships, and workplace relationships. A few of these relationships persist in my life, and getting out of them has proven to be quite difficult. The narcissistic relationships that I still have to face down continue to take a massive toll on my mental and physical health. I have left most of these relationships. There was no fixing them. Very rarely do I have to encounter any of the past narcissistic people from my life. And I always feel a little bit sick afterwards, or exhausted or sad, even if it's just a few minutes or hours when I do need to see the narcissistic people in my lives. But the only fix was to get out of the relationships. In some cases, it took me years to get out of these relationships. Even when I knew the best thing in the world was to get rid of the relationship, things got in the way, trauma bonds and all of that, right? But after I did, never in any of them did I ever look back. I have never regretted ending a single narcissistic relationship in my life. I do regret the ones I still have to interact with. And there are healthy relationships I've walked away that I do regret. I know the difference. Because when I do still interact with these narcissistic folks, I get sick. I'm in a unique period of my life right now where I'm having to interact with some particularly difficult narcissistic people. And to say that my mental and physical health have tanked is completely underplaying it. Nightly nightmares, constant stomach aches and migraines, and a sadness and a grief that I'm not able to break out of. Every day, the narcissistic abuse continues. I know it won't get better until I'm able to step out of these relationships. And there's no way I can think about it differently to make it better. Nothing that I can say that can make it better. Nothing that I can do. And when you are in the same space day after day with a narcissistic person, there's only so many ways that you can dodge and weave and avoid the gaslighting. Their presence is simply toxic. Using my example, my circumstance is such that I need to get through some big hurdles and walk away from a lot of cultural expectations and then leave it. I know what my blockades are. I also know the toll it's taking on me. That's real. I really can't heal that much as long as I'm stuck in it. I wish there was a way that people who stay could get to the same level of healing as those who leave. I just don't see it. It's like saying people who smoke can find a way to stay as healthy as non-smokers, or heavy drinkers can stay as healthy as non-drinkers, or people who eat tons of processed fats and sugars can stay as healthy as those who eat fruits and vegetables. Unless of very rare exceptions, I just don't see how that's going to happen. I think it is very important that people know this, because if they don't, especially for those who stay, they can once again fall into the patterns of self-blame, and wonder, oh, great, I can't even heal right. If you're staying and you're making progress, you're doing just fine. You need to know that there are limits on how much healing can take place in the presence of narcissists and enablers. You can go so far, you get knocked down, you get up, and you keep walking again. It can be done, but it's a much slower climb. My commitment will always be to help those who can't get out of these relationships, because trust you me, I empathize with that. The short-term workarounds, making sure you cultivate and maintain support, the sanity builders in your life, the validation, the tools that help you turn off the gaslight. But I can tell you, as a person who's in it, I can tell you ultimately, the only way to get fully healthy is to find some way to exit. Now, this is not meant to be depression. You're saying, oh, great, lady, I can't get out. So what, I'm going to be stuck? No, no, no. It's not what I said. The question is, can they heal as much? Again, probably not, because if you're in it and somebody's still continually gaslighting and invalidating you, and you're having to constantly mount up bandwidth and think about, wait, this isn't me, and you have to do so much individual work, but you're constantly being knocked down. The best example I could give you is, you're really committed to sobriety, but you live like in a bar. There's constantly people around you drinking, socializing with alcohol. It is going to be very unlikely for someone like that, especially in the early stages of sobriety, to stay sober. Some will. I mean, there's some people that have that strong a commitment, but for the average bear, it's going to be hard. It's similar here. Like I said, it doesn't mean that healing's not possible when people stay. It absolutely is. And I talk about it all the time. But to understand that the limits are quite different than for those who go, I don't want the two folks to think that they're in exactly the same, if you will, race, even though it's not a competition, but they're not going on the same destination. It's not the same track. And that's really what this is about, that there is something about get distance. And for those of you, again, if you've watched it this long, you want to drop it in the comments. If you have had, many of you have had both experiences. There's some narcissistic relationships you walked away from, and some you can't walk away from. And are you able to see the difference in the positive impact it had when you could walk away, but the ones you couldn't walk away are still taking a toll? That's what I mean. Okay. Thanks again.